Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Again, I thank you for inviting us into your beautiful home and for having this conversation with us. My first question would actually be that, there's this, there's this general saying that the Parliament represents the biggest opportunity to truly represent and the citizens of the country. What would you say inspired you to become a lawmaker, and also what has guided you over the years to continue to live a life of service to your people?
That's a very good question. So I had earlier on in my political career, when I left law school, decided to return back to Liberia, and the legislature was always a point of interest, because even though you have the constitutional requirements and prerogatives of a lawmaker, one of the things in Liberia lawmakers are, you are the first line of defense for citizens. If citizens need tuition, they come to you. If they need medical bills, they come to you. If they need rent, they come to you. And for some reason, you cannot explain to them that my functions are lawmaking, oversight. You can't tell them that. Okay, yeah. So interacting with citizens on that personal level is always very good for me. And then it allows you to do some community work. Okay. And the more you do that, the better it is. Now, a lot of folks who leave the States or leave abroad and come home would tend to run in the urban areas. Okay, I went to my rural village, re-established connections there, and that's where I represent, and that is where I work from. I found that to be very, very rewarding personally.
I mean, I just learned from your members of staff that you just returned from the rural constituency engagement, and for me that was quite for a lot of people who fancy the lives of the allures of Sweet and the city. That is, it shows that for you it's about service, and it brings me to the next question. You had an impressive career as a lawyer, anti-corruption crusader, and human rights defender. How have these experiences shaped your time in the legislature?
Okay, that has helped me on the kinds of things I focused on. We focused on the gender bill because of the experience that I have as a lawyer. We focused on the FGM bill also for that reason. We focus on the fair and decent labor bills because of those reasons. In the profession, being a lawyer, being a progressive lawyer, if I might add, you tend to pick up those causes that people call liberal, okay? You tend to go for the marginalized, go for the underrepresented. And we have a society where women are the majority, but actually are put in a minority position. And we have to constantly, in everything we do, try to make sure that our society as a whole begin to embrace certain basic concepts. We've moved out of the Stone Ages now. You know, we are a civilized democracy. So all of our citizens, male, female, regardless of tribe, and regardless of education or stature in life, should have equal opportunity in fact, and not just in theory.
That's a fantastic way to think, and you didn't just add progressive. We've seen your progressivism in the things you've chosen to do and the kinds of bill you've chosen to pursue. And the truest test of democracy, as they say, in any country, is the extent to which the parliament can ensure that the government remains answerable to the people. How has the legislature, under, of course, your support to the speaker, been able to hold the government accountable to the people?
That's an excellent question. It is a struggle. It is a continual struggle because the executive always try to resist what they call intrusion and what we call oversight. We generally have series of legislative hearings. We bring there's even difficult times in getting ministers and head of parastatals to come to the legislature. Sometimes we go out and do visits to agencies and even to corporations and concessionaires to make sure that whatever we approve in the law or whatever we approved in the concession is being carried out. Our citizens usually complain in the case of concessions on fair labor treatment. We have to make sure those things happen. When it comes to overseeing the budgetary allocations, which the executive branch is responsible for implementation of the budget, but the budget is our tool, it's our fiscal tool. So we generally ensure that the executive expenditure is along the lines of what we have approved. Then going beyond that, you have times where there has to be legislative interventions. During the COVID-19, we had to do supplemental budgets. During the rice crisis, we had to make sure that we add money in the budget for rice subsidy. So these are the kind of balances we do at the legislature. Is it perfect? I think some citizens will still say, the legislature is a rubber stamp. But I think what the citizens don't see is before we get on the floor to take a final vote, it's probably 2 or 3 months of negotiations going on. People are here, other lawmakers are here, members of the executive are here. Sometimes I go over to the president and we discuss these things extensively and negotiate them. So by the time you get to the floor of the legislature, of the House, and you put up for a vote, you already know whether it's going to pass or not. You already know but that's what the public sees, and they say, the bill came today and it passed it, But that's part for the courts.
I mean, you're very correct. Intense negotiation, lobbying, and it's give and take that happens. I remember Nigeria, for instance, during the time when the previous president Yaradua was sick and up to the point of death, God rest his soul. There was a great, the country had never witnessed anything like that, and it was up to the legislature to decide what happens afterwards. And I
watched a documentary on YouTube just about 2 weeks ago on that.
And you can imagine how the legislature brought back a country from the brain. It was at the tip of boiling over, the doctrine of necessity, which became an instrument from the legislature, became the thing that saved the country. So I commend the work of the legislature. And without the legislature, there's no democracy. That's correct. As they say. That's so my question now to you is, as Deputy Speaker of the Liberian legislature, the House of Representatives, what are some of the key legislative initiatives that you are currently working on? And what are the expected impact of some of this? Of course, those you've already touched on, those you've already concluded, and those you're currently working on. Okay,
so the major thing we're working on now is a change in the rules, which was introduced by me. We want to change the rules. So again, for transparency, our votes are recorded. Generally, what we do on the floor, if it's a financial bill, we do show of hands. When you do show of hands, it's very difficult to go back 5 months from now and say, who actually voted for this? So we want to introduce the rules where our votes are recorded, so the public can judge as to how and when we voted, because oftentimes when there's controversy, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, a law is not working and people say, you passed the law. You want to be able to say, no, the reason why I opposed this at the time is because of X and Y and Z reason. So I think that's my major push for going towards the end of the session. We've had a concession that is coming up, which is the Mittal Steel, as to whether or not we're going to renew. It has to do with the issue of whether or not we keep control of our infrastructure, that is who runs the rail. Those are things, even the Americans have become involved. So going to the end of session, those would be the big 2 items that would be on my legislative agenda. There's not much more time before we adjourn. This is an election year, and everybody's mind is not in their constituency.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an election year. So, and as they say, during elections, governance takes backseat.
That's correct. That's correct.
So that's your landmark gender bill has attracted local and global attention. Can you tell us more about this bill and what inspired you to pursue the gender bill?
Okay, so it's one of those things where it was a perfect storm. You got a president who we call he for she is the feminist in chief. You have a vice president who was the first initiator of the gender equity bill. It didn't pass previous legislatures. And then you had the leadership, myself foremost, who were liberal enough to believe this is something whose time had come. There was difficulty because, of course, the majority of the members, male members, did not think that we should even go there. They raised the argument that 30% gender parity bill is unconstitutional because it should be a situation of one man, one vote, and everybody compete the same way. Well, I do not believe in quotas, but I believe in affirmative action. To the extent where women have been historically oppressed or locked out of the political system, government has to take affirmative action to equal that balance. And in taking that affirmative action, you have to set some sort of guidelines. And when the We Are government came to power, all of those things came to and fro in terms of the actors and in terms of the mindset of the policy. So it was easier for us to jump on that bandwagon and say, okay, look, this is a bill whose time has come. Let's go ahead and put it in the elections law. Let's go ahead and rally for it. Attended several UN sponsors programs, got several high-profile people to come in, worked behind the scenes with my colleagues, and at the end made sure that the gender bill passed. I got to tell you, up until the day that we passed that bill, I was not sure we were going to get the votes, but we did get it. That's some of the backroom negotiations that
happened before. Correct. I mean, like you said, nobody sees the negotiations, but they see the. And I must commend you for that, because that in itself just launched Liberia into one of the progressive countries in the continent, which is something that we've been pushing for generally. And again, as a frontline figure in the promotion of democracy, human rights, good governance in Liberia and beyond, what in your view can be done to deepen democracy across the continent, given the some of the things we've seen across some of the sub-regions and what we're experiencing, and how the ECOWAS and other members and other regional bodies are doing to ensure the deepening of democracy? What in your view should also be done to ensure that we continue to practice democracy in its truest form?
I'm afraid I don't have a short-term fix for this. I think what we need to embark upon is a healthy system of education. We need to increase our literacy rates up. We need to get our populations more in tuned with what democracy really is. I don't think our people are exercising the right kinds of power in terms of how they vote and in terms of what they expect of their lawmakers. You have to be able to expect that the lawmaker is not only there to pay your rent when you need it.
Yes.
That the lawmakers, you must hold us accountable to some of the laws we raise our hands and pass. You must be able to pay attention to some of the debates that we're getting into. You must be able to fashion a vote for a person as a lawmaker, not just because he came by your house and gave you a bag of rice, but because you have studied it and he has made a presentation that have you convinced that he will do an excellent job as a lawmaker. Because the way to protect the democracy is, you got to have people who have the capacity to be able to make the case, especially in the legislature. It's in the legislature that you have where things may break down, because the executive is always fighting for more power.
Yes.
It is the resistance of the executive from the legislature that's what balances the democracy.
Yes,
otherwise, you give everything to the executive, and then when the executive screws up, that's the end of the ball game. So I think building our human capacity and our people understanding of this democracy we have is going to be the best thing for us.
Absolutely. I think, like you said, education, as they say, is the leveler. It is what equates, it is what gives you the capacity to really interrogate, like you said, policies, programs, and ask questions, and like you say, hold leaders accountable to decisions they make on your behalf. Because ultimately, the legislature is the greatest, base of the people. So they are actually the ones that should ask the right questions. And if the citizens are not asking those questions, are not holding their leaders accountable, then democracy will collapse. And I totally agree with you on that front. Now, like in other parts of the world, the COVID pandemic and the war in Ukraine exacerbated economic hardship and led to increase in the cost of living. It's general. It's happening in France. It's happening everywhere. And so How is the Liberian Parliament, the legislature this time, helping to ease the burden and also promote responsive policies that can mitigate the impact of this prevailing challenge that we have across the world?
Okay, so the first thing is I would give credit to the George Weah government for doing a good job in economic stewardship. But on the legislative level, we made several interventions because when COVID-19 came, we passed a supplemental budget that was able to get direct aid to citizens. Because what we had done was, because of the lockdown, people had to get food.
Absolutely.
People had to get essential items. So the government had to pay for those items and get them delivered. So that's one of the things we did. We did intervention in rice subsidy when we had, because of the war in Ukraine, we had a rice crisis. We continue to make interventions. We now have this program for rural poor women, where we give them direct mobile money transfers to their phones. That is becoming a very popular program in the interior, especially in my constituency. So those are some of the interventions the legislature make to make sure that although there are economic hardships, there are things we can do to try to ease that burden.
Amazing. I'm glad you talked about rural women and their benefits and all that. It brings me to the next question, which is on constituency outreaches and engagement. It is the hallmark of the legislature. It is the closest, as they were, the closest government that the people see. How can you share some of your constituency engagement and what are your priority focus on those engagements as it were?
Okay, so one of the things we do every year is we go back home and we tell our citizens this is what we achieved in the year prior. We do that about April every year. We didn't do that this year because we're going to combine all of that with our election year campaign. Then the second thing we do is we make sure that our citizens who come to Monrovia get the services from the government they need. Then we also reach out to our citizens in the constituents themselves to make sure things like healthcare, education, and social welfare benefits are available to them. That's how we reach out to them. We have a district office, our district, and we have 6 district coordinators for the 6 districts. And we reach out that way to our citizens. And as I said, being a third world lawmaker is challenging. So we try to accommodate all those needs because we got to do everything from paying rent to making sure your pension benefits get to you on time.
I mean, you just nailed it there when you said being the lawmaker, because there's a distinction. You are the government they see, so they believe that whatever happens there, this is the man that we should hold responsible. And I'm glad you've just mentioned those district offices, because one of the major challenges we've seen with lawmaking across the continent is the disconnect between the people and their lawmaker. So that district office would definitely help. What message, would you like to send to the people of Liberia in an election year and the international community about what to expect from Liberia, from the legislature, and of course the country in general as it goes into this election?
I think what Liberia will show this year, as we've shown in the by-elections, and I think this is going to be a critical general elections, is I think you will see an election relatively free of violence. Electoral violence is going to be de minimis. I think you will see vigorous electoral challenges and electoral process. I think you have a situation now where the more the democracy grows in the society, the more people want to participate. When I say people want to participate, more people want to be lawmakers and more people want to be president. So the more these things happen, the more you will see vigorous campaign process. I expect to see that. I think at the end of the day, Liberians will be the winner. The voter registration process was very, very, very intense. I was disappointed that it was difficult to convince our citizens that your vote is your power and registering to vote is what you needed to do. So we had to get in the trenches to try to explain that to our people. If you don't register, there's no way you will be able to participate in this. There's no way you will be able to see me, because I'm not going to waste my time with somebody who's not registered to vote, because you're going to have no impact. So I think the international community will see a robust Liberian democracy. I think we'll see at the end of the day that Liberians will come together, because this is going to be a very interesting election.
Amazing. And a final note from me: in July this year, you will be joining other leaders at the House of Lords for the Africa Summit, which has become a major platform for engagement and discussing Africa.
Sure.
And this year it's taking place at the House of Lords. There is no much more bigger platform to advocate and advance issues that relate to the continent than those kind of environment. What are your expectations and your thought about the engagement, especially knowing that you are, of course, a legislator, and you will be amongst those, of course, who have won functions, as it were, towards the British government?
That's a very good question. One of the things that excite me about this is, as I advanced my legislative career, it seemed to me my own personal deficit was I'm not connecting with other African legislators. There's a Catholic group, but other than that, we need to expand, because when you meet someone from Sierra Leone or someone from Nigeria also, you will be able to have a common thread on constituency work. Then when you do it in an advanced democracy like in London, you get a bigger picture. Let me give you an example. In the United States, they say money is the mother milk of politics. It's the same here. But they spend their money on presentation. They spend their money on making sure that the citizens know who they are, what they've done, maybe attacking their opponents, and all of that. We spend our money, one t-shirt, one vote. One bag of rice, one vote. That's what we do, okay? Yeah. So it's the same. So getting to meet lawmakers who have that same sort of experience, combined with then meeting age-old democracies and understanding how they do theirs, I think it's going to be an exciting time to be in London.
There's no way to end this than, it's going to be an exciting time, and I'm sure there are other engagement lined up afterwards, and I'm hopeful that this engagement would also enrich your legislative career back home, and of course the people of your constituents will be better for it. Thank you very much.
We look forward to it.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.